Altered is a game that in every sense mixes the world of reality with that of imagination. We play characters from human literature across time, like Dr. Frankenstein and Sun Wukong. It takes from these pieces of literature to give us characters to play and references for us to get, but in its world building it also takes from these stories in certain ways that have been interesting for me to uncover over the past few months of reading Altered lore. And today I want to talk about what they take from Greek myth to build out its world in very interesting ways. I recently put out a video of the entire story and world of Altered in 10 minutes. You can go and watch that video. I would recommend doing so. I will reintroduce all of the things that are important to this video here, but there is much more information there if you seek to find out more. Sure, we play cards like Athena, Chiron, Atlas, and Achilles, but we all know their stories. I'm much more interested on how the legends of Greek mythology have influenced the world building and lore in Altered. Okay, first let's talk about the Oneiroi. We see in the Anatomy of Imagination world article on the website that the world was originally destroyed and changed forever by the breaking of the veil, keeping reality and imagination separate. And when imagination and the world of the Imperium ripped through reality, it created these tumult storms that would ever change the landscape. Those who first survived this cataclysmic event, now known as the Confluence, were known as the Tumult Nomads. The Tumult Nomads ended up in 8 separate tribes, and it seems like each of these were helped by these mysterious creatures called the Oneiroi. The Oneiroi gave the Tumult Nomads the knowledge to use things like alteration and their magic in general, as well as they gave them the information necessary about this peninsula safe haven that all 8 tribes would end up heading towards and would be their home for the next 400 years. I'm going to read a small excerpt from the website article about the Oneiroi. There are myriad entities beyond the veil. Some are only memories, lingering, fleeting in the world of imagination until oblivion takes them away, while others are much older, existing since time immemorial. Their names have resonated in the human world for millennia: Horus, Sleeping Beauty, Amaterasu, Peter Pan, or Fafnir, to name a few. These creatures of the imagination call themselves the Oneiroi, the inhabitants of dreams. I find it really interesting that every time the Oneiroi are mentioned, we get names for them, but none of these names of stories and myths of the past are cards we have yet. We have Beauty Sleep the Spell, but we don't have Sleeping Beauty. We have Anubis, but we don't have Horus. And every time they're mentioned, it's things like these. I imagine we'll get these cards and characters later on, but maybe there's something special about the Oneiroi that we don't quite understand yet, that are different than the characters we have been playing. Even though I think creatures and characters like Athena would qualify as Oneiroi and fit the group of everything else that have been listed. Now, when I was first looking up more information to make that first video, I wanted to make sure I was pronouncing Oneiroi correctly. And what I found when doing that is the word comes from Greek myth, and potentially even the Greek language, just meaning dream. There seems to be a couple different areas and times where this pops up in different Greek mythology stories, and I'll cover a couple of those here. The first is that the Oneiroi seem to be the offspring of Nyx, and that these Oneiroi are led by Morpheus. And they come out every single night as a flock of winged beings out of either two gates, either the gate of horn, which they come out of to tell dreams that are true, that will predict the future, or the gate of ivory to go out to tell dreams that are false and to trick people. Another time we see Oneiroi in Greek myth is in Homer's Iliad, where we see that Zeus calls upon an Oneiroi to visit the commander of the Greek army in Troy to get him to battle and be more aggressive. The Oneiroi visits this commander during the night, finds him asleep, and gives him a dream where he shows up as this commander's lead counselor and convinces him to go into battle. And the commander wakes up and follows these suggestions that have been put in his head. I would be interested to know if this same mythology and story existed in the world of Altered, or maybe even still potentially exists. That the Oneiroi are these creatures of legend that maybe the most prestigious of historians and philosophers on Asgartha still know of from the past. Or if the name Oneiroi came from this time, or if the time of Greek myth was just a mixing of the imagination and reality even more, that the name Oneiroi prevailed through it. Also, in the world of Altered, whenever somebody creates a physical form of something from their imagination or from storybook characters, when an Exalt does this to help adventure through the tumult, that creature, that thought form they create is called an Eidolon. Eidolon also comes from Greek mythology. Eidolons in Greek myth were phantoms, ghosts of people from the past. We see multiple times in Homer's stories and other stories Helen of Troy coming back as an Eidolon, a ghost of her former self. How this tracks to Altered is very interesting, that these thought forms and creatures of our imaginations we don't think of as ghosts or phantoms when we play a Haven Bouncer or something like that. We do know that when an Alterer uses their imagination and mana and aether to create these Eidolons, that they can stay for a long period of time, that they can gain their own personalities. And I find that interesting, that they can, with enough magic and enough skill from the Alterer, kind of become a ghost of their past selves, a phantom of what used to be, using the magic of the Imperium to do so. We also get a couple excerpts of the Oneiroi being able to be summoned in their physical form by Alterers. I'm interested to know if this is the Alterers summoning an Eidolon of the Oneiroi, or if they're actually able to summon the true Oneiroi self. But that would be something interesting to discover along the way. I appreciate you sticking through this video. I just found these couple connections kind of interesting, and this type of video is more so what I think I plan on doing in the future, kind of breaking up down these lore and the characters and connecting it to the stories in the real world, maybe doing character deep dives and looking at the myths and stories the characters we play come from. I also want to do a prediction video on Set 2 and beyond. There's some interesting things in the lore that I think could affect the story in interesting ways, and they've been brewing in my head, and I want to get those thoughts out as well.